Subarnalatha by Asha Purna Devi. Author intro. Asha Purna Devi was a prominent Indian novelist and poet in Bengali. In 1976, she was awarded the Janpith Award and Padma Shri by the Government of India by the Universities of Jamalpur. Vishwa Bharati University honored her with Deshkondam in 1989. For her contribution as a novelist and short story writer, the Satya Academy conferred its highest honor, the Sahitya Academy Fellowship, in 1994. Her early childhood was spent in a traditional and extremely conservative family. According to Ashapurna, she and her sister used to compete with each other by composing and redacting poems. This inspired Ashapurna to secretly send a poem to Sisu Sakti in 1922. Ashapurna was 13 and her poem Bahir Dak, The Call from the Outside, was published. Upon her death, she had been widely honored with a number of prizes and awards. In January 2009, Doordarshan broadcast a documentary about her, and a Good Day event was organized to celebrate what would have been her 101st birthday. Background of the fiction: Subarnalatha, a story of a woman, ahead of her times, was brought alive on the stage by Kishti Theatre Group under the able of direction Kirti Jain at Stein Auditorium, New Delhi on Saturday. Subarnalatha forms second book of the trilogy by noted Bengali writer Ashapurna Devi. The novels deal with lives of three generations of women in early 19th century of Bengal. The first book, from Pramod Parshruti, fetched the writer coveted Kanput Award. The third book, Bokul Kant, is about Shabarnalatha's daughter Bokul. Kitty was picked up a few incidents from these books, which very effectively highlight Sabarnalatha's lifelong fight against the oppressive treatment meted to women and a desire of equal dignity and right as men. Married off at the stage of 9, against her mother's wish, Sabarnalatha days comprised of never-ending tongue lashing of her mother-in-law, physical abuse of her husband, and her desire to break free from the confine of the four walls of the house, even if that meant just a glimpse of the road from the veranda. Her new friendship with her neighbor, with whom she could talk to by tapping the wall in a way of signal, proves to be short lived. Shabarnalatha does leave the house in protest but only to return as her father expresses his inability to give her shelter on account of social stigma. Use of two Tagore songs added a lot of weight to the narration, but not Bengali. Knowing audience might not have been able to appreciate how approximate they were to the play.
Summary of the novel. Sabarnalatha learns about the endless struggle of the women to establish their unnamed identity amidst a patriarchal culture from her mother, Satyabati. Since her childhood, she was introduced to the essential education of being a human being, not a woman. This contradicted the social norms and sowed the seed of humanism in Sabarnalatha, with which she tried to judge every custom, be it social, religious, or personal, or even in her later marital life, and raised her voice of protest against the sexual politics inherent in them. However, Sabarna was forcefully married to Prabhu Chandra, and her untimely wedding came as a disaster in her life. Satyabati abandoned her family and went to Kasi in protest. Sabarnalatha had to painfully bear the burden of this daring act of her mother throughout her life, with occasional taunting from her in laws. But what Satyabati could do was quite impossible for anybody else. She started the agitation in her own way by choosing the oddest bedroom for her. Although the other members of her family considered her to be weird and mentally challenged, Subarnalatha succeeded in transcending the earthly desires of getting a home. In spite of all these problems and tongue in cheek comments, her search for her own space continued. Intellectual stimulation came in the form of the writings of Rabindranath. Jayadidi gave Sabarna books and magazines through the small hole in the wall, but her freedom was destroyed by her husband and she was compelled to go to the labor room several times. She even educated her children in the footprints of her mother and started coaching the little girls and boys of her family personally, which was mocked by her in laws as Mijo Jiner Patshala. Unlike the other women of the family who conformed to the laws of patriarchy and performed the duties of the family like good housewives, Sabarnalatha raised her voice and demanded a different atmosphere, where the woman will get the status to stand beside men in equal rights. She also advocates for the proper sanitation of the labor room, which at that time was a luxury for middle class people to provide. But she is in turn insulted by Maktokishi, which shows how women are indoctrinated to patriarchal views are sometimes more cynical and crueler than men. Women themselves became the representatives of patriarchy. Apart from this, Sabarnalatha, being a common middle class housewife, proved herself to be unique by addressing and reacting to the Swadeshi movement that was starting in the whole country. The Swadeshi movement moved her and compelled her to participate silently from Antapur, the inner chamber that was starting in the whole country. The Swadeshi movement moved her and compelled her to participate silently from Antapur, the inner chamber. Sabarna abandoned the foreign goods by burning all the new clothes for the Durga Puja. While her in laws were scared of this daring act of annoying the British, surprisingly, the maid servant supports her. She uses her unique attitude and novel outlook to analyze the difference in responses of the lower classes and the middle class to the nationalist movement. She tries to inscribe her thoughts in her personal diary, where she writes about herself, about the condition of women in society. Unfortunately, her dream of bringing up her children in her own light, for which she endlessly fought, was not fully successful. Her children always felt that her wishes and aspirations were peculiar, thus, they never understood her and maintained a distance from her. She realized that she performed the duty of a mother but lacked affection. Sabarnalatha turned into a feminist role model from an ordinary Bengali woman. She became the true heir of her mother. Bakul is her only daughter who looks into her mother's life and tries to understand Sabarna's journey. Bakul takes the responsibility of writing the story of her mother and grandmother first before writing her own. Though Sabarna left no sign of her creativity, she successfully sowed it in the heart of her daughter.
Settings of the novel. The culturally rich and prosperous land of Bengal has produced a number of talented writers and groundbreaking novels over the years. Famous authors like Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore brought Bengali literature to the fore. However, any discussion about Bengali literature would be incomplete without mentioning the contribution made by the female literature. Even when penned by male authors, most female characters in Bengali novels were usually shown as women of substance and with a free mindset of their own. When women started representing themselves in literature, it just not offered a new perspective to the readers but also portrayed the struggles and dreams of a woman. The pioneer of feminist Bengali literature is undoubtedly Ashapurna Devi. Born into a very orthodox North Kolkata family, Ashapurna Devi's whole life was spent amidst the four walls. Her writings describe the lives of the housewives in 19th century. She essays a time when Bengal Renaissance was slowly picking up pace and women's liberation movement is finding its roots. They were inhuman and archaic customs as well as social census, and women's journey to self-discovery was full of inflexible patriarchal restrictions. There was also a hidden and ardent desire to break free from the shackles of society. Her magnum opus, the Satyabali trilogy, Pothom Protestary, Subarnalatha, and Bakul Kotha, is certainly one of the most popular and celebrated book series of Bengali literature. The three novels narrate the stories of three generations of women. Subarnalatha is the second book of her maternal trilogy. In this book, Bakul recounts the story of her mother, Subarnalatha, and writes the story of her mother to posit their struggle against the society. Symbols. The novel Subarnalatha is a symbol of the desperate suffering of a soul. The social status and barriers of women in the first half of the 20th century are very clear from this novel. In this story, we see that as she grew older, she began to get her mother's thought. Subarnalatha found such a father-in-law's house where she had to read books in secret. So Subarnalatha seems to be much more unfortunate than her mother Satyavati. All her life she had kept her head down, and when she went to stand for a while, she was suppressed. She was not allowed to fulfill her hobby. She wanted their new home to have a porch on the south side, but her husband and brothers-in-law did not put the porch there. They show the cause was women can't stand the porch. Meanwhile, her husband had taken a lot from her by promising to build that south porch. The day she sees that the porch is not there, she gets a big hit. Subarnalatha has often done good things for the family. Her sister-in-law is married with all her jewelry, and instead she got humiliated. In anger and grief, she tried to commit suicide more than once. No, she didn't get sympathy. She got more humiliation and torture. Even her sons did not look back at her. She could not raise her sons and daughters as per her own choice. But later she got a south porch, lying on that porch and giving up her last breath.
The major characters of the novel Subarnalatha. First, Ambika, Muktokeshi's daughter, Subala's cousin by marriage. Second, Hemangini, Muktokeshi's cousin. Third, Jayavati, Subarnalatha's friend, related to Muktokeshi's family by marriage. Fourth, Jogo, Muktokeshi's nephew, brother-in-law. And last, Shaima Sundari, Muktokeshi's sister-in-law, brother's wife. Next, the female characters of the novel Subarnalatha. First, Malati, the daughter of the minister of Padmavati, Burivasu. She is in love with Madhava. The next, Madayantik, the sister of Nandana and friend of Malati. She is in love with Makaranda. The fourth one, Kamandaki, the priestess of Buddha, the hearse of Malati and teacher of Madhava. The fourth one is Kapala Kundala, the priestess of Chamunda. The fifth one is Saudamini, the disciple of Kamandaki and possessor of magical powers. And the sixth one, La Ankika, foster sister of Malati. The seventh one is Mandarika, attendant of Kamandiki and beloved of Kalamsa. The last one, Buddha Rakshita and Abalokita, principles of Kamandaki.
Now, let's discuss about the themes of Subarnalatha. The novel Subarnalatha enhances the themes of struggles and dreams of a woman, shackles of society, patriarchal restrictions. Subarnalatha fights to search for a space of her own within the male dominated society. This search becomes a struggle against the existing patriarchal social structures which denies the existence of women as an individual who are different from their so called social guardians. Society's denial to grant her a free will and independence gave rise to another demand of the women, the creative space, which in the true sense becomes a real space of her own. Subarnalatha starts to search for her creative space to express her locked up desires and to come out of her social cage. She ultimately becomes the true torchbearer of the feminist movement, which was initiated in her by her mother, Satyapati, and she continues her war against the inhuman patriarchal system from the Andar Mahal, the inner house. The Dakshinar Baranda, the south facing balcony, symbolizes her dreams of an open space where she will able to live a free life and after a better life for her daughter. Thank you.
Critical analysis of Sparnalatha. In critical analysis, we can see the theme of emancipation of women. Married off at the age of 9 against her mother's wish, Sparnalatha's days comprise of never-ending tongue clashing of her mother-in-law Muktakeshi and physical abuse of her husband Kedarnath, and her desire to break free from the confine of the four wall of the house, even if that means just a glimpse of the road from the veranda. Her new friendship with a neighbor with whom she could talk to by tapping the wall in a way of signal proves to be short-lived. So Swarnalatha does leave the house in protest, but only to return as her father expresses his inability to give her shelter on account of social stigma. The social stigma plays a crucial role throughout this play, and the sound of the freedom struggle echoes in Parna's house too. But her attempt to identify with the movement by burning the foreign cloth or rudely snubbed. Her support was her daughter Bakul, understanding brother-in-law Ambika, and a letter from her mother written long ago encouraging her not to give up the right to live her life on their own term, and the participation of the women in the freedom struggles. Parna, being a middle class housewife, proved herself unique by addressing reacting to the nationalist movement that was surging the whole country. She did not go out of her family, for that was not possible, so she created her own space within the macro historical event by addressing it with her own personal pangs. And then she searched for her own path. Despite of all this frustration and search for her own space continue, she got her intellectual stimulation from the writing of Rabindranath Tagore. J.R.J.D. supplied her with books, magazine through the small hole in the wall, but her little space within the printer line was devastated by her husband. She was compelled to go to the labor room several times. She tried to make her son, daughter, educated, following the footprint of her mother, and started coaching the little boys and girls of her family personally, which was mocked by her in laws. Even though they were mocked, Sparna fight with her own spirit. And this search become the struggle against the existing patriarchal social structure, which actually denies the existence of women as an individual who are different from their so-called social guardian. Society's denial to grant her a free will and independence give rise to another demand of the women, the creative space, which in the true sense become real space of her own. Sparnalata start to search for her creative space to express her locked up desire to come out of a social cage. She ultimately became the true torchbearer of the feminist movement, which was initiated in her by her mother Satyabadi, and she continued her war against the inhuman patriarchal system. Thank you.